when you accept sort of like the deepest part of yourself that society either says is limiting or says is wrong or bad or you should hide, when you kind of embrace that part of yourself and recognize the asset that it is, there's a huge liberation that comes with that.
Welcome to The Wheelchair Activist, a podcast hosted by me, Emma Vogelman, and every month I interview amazing members and allies of the disabled community who are quite literally changing the world. Lachi, I am so incredibly excited to have you on today's episode of the Wheelchair Activist podcast. For anyone who doesn't know who you are, can you please introduce yourself to our amazing audience?
Absolutely. My name is Lachi, she, her. I am a Black woman with cornrows. Today I'm wearing a sparkly jacket. I am coming to you from New York. I also identify as Aries, so that is double trouble. I identify as blind and neurodivergent, and I'm a recording artist, a songwriter, a touring author, speaker, disability advocate, TV personality, all of the things, creator, gosh darn it, recently became a dancer, didn't really realize I could move, and then well, my body just started doing it. Ultimately, I think I really sit in the space of disability culture. So I'm the CEO and founder of RAMPed, Recording Artists and Music Professionals with Disabilities. And I am also on the National Board of Trustees for the Recording Academy, which is the GRAMMYs. And I do a ton of work advocating for disability inclusion in the music industry.
My God, I think that's the most amount of titles we've ever had on this show. But I'm so here for it because I mean, this is probably such a dated reference. So like, forgive me if like the Gen Z listeners have no idea what I'm about to say. But I'm like, you give me Ryan Seacrest because don't
Oh
they
my
say
goodness
like
gracious.
he's the busiest man in Hollywood or something, or at least at like one point in time. This was back when like Adam
He was
Lambert
like
was like,
hosting every single show.
exactly. It was like back in the good old American Idol days, which was definitely my guilty pleasure at one point in time. But yeah, oh my God, I'm so excited to talk to you because for those of you who don't know, I'm a huge music fan. Like music is such a big part of my life. I go to concerts as much as I possibly can. My happy place is definitely at a live gig. I just think that there's
Sure,
nothing like
sure,
live
sure.
music and just, music generally. Again, for like context, my parents are massive Rolling Stones fans.
Okay,
And
got it.
they literally followed the Rolling Stones from like America to Canada to the
Oh, they actually like
UK.
go to the concerts that are far away.
They did. I think my parents, they've easily seen the Rolling Stones 50 times.
Oh, okay. So
And
they're that type.
they're that type. And they'll go like 3 nights in a row. And so now when it's like me and my favorite artists, I'm like, well, yeah, if they're playing 3 nights in a row somewhere that I can get to, I'm going 3 nights in a row.
It's the somewhere that I can get to part, right? Like a
Yeah.
lot of times people think folks with disabilities or deaf folks don't like music or don't like concerts
Yeah.
because they don't see us there. But we love it. You just got to get us in.
Exactly. And you have to make that inclusive. And I think, we'll obviously get into like
Right.
live music and how different artists are making different things accessible for different groups or, different impairment groups. But I'm just desperate to talk to you about your music, like your career. Like I think let's start
Sure.
with like where did this all start for you?
Yeah, it's funny, and I know we're gonna touch on the book as well. It's all in there. It was quite the journey writing all of my earlies down. But, I tend to say that I had always had music sort of in my heart, in my life. Music, poetry, drawing, all of the things. When I had better vision,
Mm.
I was making comics. And my mom said while other babies were kicking in the stomach, I was playing the keys against her stomach. And I keep trying to figure out how she had a piano in there. She won't tell me. She's not a liar. So,
I mean,
um,
yeah, mothers are always right, so.
mothers are always, I will not second guess how she had a Steinway up in there. But
I
anyway,
mean, obviously.
But yeah, I always had artistry in my heart. And, as a sort of outcasted kid, I would turn to the piano, I would turn to my poetry for outlet, to understand the world better, and honestly, to performance, to have the world understand me. And when I would watch the TV or listen to the radio or hop on YouTube or whatnot, and I'd be like, I want to do that, right? I want to be those
Yeah.
people. And I didn't know exactly what, but I knew I wanted to do something in music or something in writing. And my parents didn't have like somebody at the top of the vision board, right, for me to be
Mm.
like, oh, yes, you can be like that. My teachers didn't, my friends didn't, I didn't. And so I just took the straight and narrow path. But I always had music in my heart when I went to school and when I went to college and when I began like working a day job. But I kind of knew I was living a bit of a double life. And, my parents being African, I was born here, but they're both Nigerian. So, of course, they really wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer or a
Sure.
whatever, anything that ends with, OR, where you have to be in school for 46 years. And
Yeah.
that just wasn't me. So eventually I took the leap. I was paying New York rent and I
Oh,
didn't like have anything to back it up. I just left my job, didn't have a way to pay rent, didn't have health care, didn't have any PTO, but I was like, I know I have to give my whole self to
mm.
being an artist. And so I dove all the way in, and here we are now.
I mean, there's so much in there that I want to talk to you about, but I mean, the real motivation behind the wheelchair activists and starting this podcast to begin with is because disabled people like you and I, we didn't have that person. Like you say, at the top of the vision board, there wasn't a blueprint for people like us in the careers that we necessarily wanted to do. And I think we really see that in the music industry, right? I think that there are improvements, but I personally don't see the music industry being particularly inclusive, at least from the outside, towards disabled people. Obviously, there are a couple of the greats who, are visually impaired or who are blind, but they're not that many. And, they are, I'm thinking of like Stevie Wonder, Ray Charles, the really obvious ones. But like, what was that like for you to not have sort of someone who you could identify with as sort of a person who tried to do it first?
Yeah. Well, because even for me, the Stevie Wonders and the Ray Charleses weren't really folks I could look up to because when you
Yeah,
think of music, the genre was way off.
yeah,
Um, they're dudes, you know? And
exactly.
so it's why I created Ramped. I remember when I was really just getting started and I Googled like disability and music. I feel like music therapy things came up or
Mm,
adaptive instruments or some things for parents. And I was like, is there not a community? Is there not like a label? Is there not somebody doing this work? And so there wasn't. And one of
mhm.
the things I found, so I started out by getting signed. I went down to South by Southwest randomly. I didn't have a gig. I was just playing in an empty bar and an A&R
Oh, wow.
spotted me. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah. I know that
amazing.
story seems so like fairy tale, right?
Yeah, it
Um,
feels like it should be in a movie.
it should. Can you help me write to these movie directors?
Absolutely.
But it wasn't the best situation. You don't just wake up one morning and get signed to a major deal and then everything's awesome.
Mm,
I didn't read the fine print enough, but we signed for one album,
mhm.
and I didn't like the way they were marketing me actually. They were marketing me as like the disabled singer, the disabled musician, or the blind singer, which it's funny when I tell people this, they go, "But that's what you call yourself now, Lachi. You're very proud about your disability." And I was like, now I'm saying it from a place of power,
Yeah.
and at that time, they were using it exploitatively. So I didn't like that. So I left the music industry for a bit. And then I came back about 2017-ish,
Mhm.
and I got signed again to sort of like a dance music firm, and they were having me songwrite for larger artists. So this was an established firm, and I was getting a bunch of gigs here and there to write. And it was nice. I was kind of in the background and I was writing for other people and kind of collecting checks, right?
Yeah.
But then one of my songs that was actually a demo with my voice on it, a big name DJ was like, I want to put it out just like this with her voice on it. And
Oh,
so they
cool.
did. That song, did very well. And so my manager was like, we need to make you an artist and put you back out there.
Mm,
So I started getting back out there. I started doing this. I started doing that. He was getting me on the radio. And so then the reason I'm telling you all this is because here's where the crux came. I was becoming a mid-ish artist, right? No longer a struggling artist, right?
mm,
I was going to studios, I was doing sessions with bigger names, and nothing was accessible, right?
uh,
So I couldn't see, and mind you, before I wasn't doing like these bigger things. So I was just kind of making it work. Now that I'm doing these bigger things, I'm like, I need to let people know that I need this
yeah,
stuff, or else I'm not going to be able to perform at my best. And then I'm not going to be able to keep getting these gigs. Honestly, because of that, I had to start advocating for myself just so I could do really well in these sessions. So I'd
mm,
have to let people know ahead of time what I needed, that I was legally blind. Somebody needs to come down and get me. And that, sometimes I would need like a walkthrough before we start. So I know like where the restroom is, or so I'm not
mm-hmm,
tripping over wires and stuff like that. Generally, there'll be like a big computer screen that everyone's looking at where the engineer's like cutting and pasting things
mm,
to let the engineer know that I can't see that. So we'll have to kind of change the language. The thing about it is that I kept always being the first person they ever heard of to do something like that. And
mm,
generally, people were accommodating as best they could be, but it was more because of the clout that I had, not because, they were just generally wanted to be more accessible.
yeah,
But as I got into these bigger and better rooms, I started asking people, hey, what are you doing for accessibility? Like I started making it bigger than just myself. I would get responses like, oh, well, it's just you and Stevie Wonder. Like, who else are we going to do this for?
yeah,
And I was like, well, first of all, that's just one disability. And even that
yeah.
disability is a whole spectrum. So I started becoming like this whole advocate on my own. And I was like, I came to a realization that there's got to be way more people in the music industry that also have disabilities, neurodivergences, and other conditions that are
Mm,
just masking like I was.
yeah,
And when I had that epiphany, I was like, holy shit. And then yada, 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 Ramped was born. I wanted to
mm,
start meeting and collectivizing other folks in my position who were music industry professionals, music creators who were working creators. So not kids, not children of parents, not
yeah,
folks who are just like aspiring, but people who are working at level that are masking.
yeah.
I wanted a place for that. I wanted a voice for that. And so Ramped was born. And so was my trajectory through the Recording Academy to become a trustee of the Grammys, doing specifically that work of making the industry more disability inclusive.
Again, there's so much in there. I think it's sad to hear that you had to mask and that you just sort of had to muddle along and make do and all of that in the very beginning. But it honestly, it sounds very similar to a lot of even more traditional industries and workplaces where disabled people either they don't ask for what they need or they don't know that they can or that they should ask
Yeah,
for various adjustments or they don't know what might work for them. And I think that's part of the real challenge with being the first or, to be the first person to figure out that conversation in that industry, that company, or whatever it might be. But it's encouraging, I suppose, to
good.
hear that because you had made this amazing reputation for yourself, that it was in their interest to
Right.
make sure that you had everything that you needed to continue to be amazing, to be even better than you were before because you're not dealing with those access barriers anymore. So
Exactly.
you can actually put your full self, your full heart, your full brain into the art.
And give the client a better product. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're working at a company, they want you to do your best, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
keep saying, like, if they want me to type an email, I'm going to need a computer. Like,
yeah,
so give me the stuff I need to do the tasks at my best to give you the best output. Um,
exactly. And I think there are people who will, think like, oh, well, is that special treatment? It's like, no, it isn't.
it's
It's
called
make
accommodation. At the end of the day,
exactly.
everybody has different needs. And
Absolutely.
so I don't like the term special needs
Yeah,
because
me neither.
Like, what are you talking about? Everybody has needs that are individualized needs. No needs are
Yeah.
more special than anybody else's needs. And I mean, I have special needs, but they're in the bedroom, DM's open. Um, but anyway, I think what you're saying is super powerful. This idea of like a lot of folks having to navigate masking because they
Mm,
don't have role models. They don't see enough people out there already doing it. And it's one of the reasons why I did create rants, but it's also why I wrote the book I wrote.
yeah.
Every time I introduce myself, I say I identify as blind. And
Hmm.
I say that because it's like I pride my blind identity. It's not just, oh my God, oh so sad, woe is me, I'm blind. When I was younger, I used to be super ashamed for being blind, right? I used to have all this
Mm,
shame surrounding my blindness. And then today I am super unashamed and I'm still blind. So obviously the blindness isn't the problem, right?
yeah.
So really what the issue is I just need to be accommodated. I need to have life be accessible. And when I'm accommodated and able to be included and get what I need, then my blindness is a huge asset, like a huge, huge
Mm,
asset. Like all of a sudden, I'm super focused. I have drive. I can problem solve because I got to
mm,
figure out ways to do things that other people, it's super simple for them because they can just see it. For me, I have to do some, beautiful mind-esque jujitsu. And if
yeah.
I do that all day, then it becomes a thing that is just sort of a muscle. And so
Yeah.
really, I wanted to tell a story of like, who are all these visionaries that have been driving progress that we don't know about, who have disabilities,
Hmm.
who have neurodivergences and other conditions. And so I dig into that in the book, I Identify as Blind, but we also
Hmm.
dig into that in Renegades on PBS.
Okay.
Very similar situation. It's like, let's dig into who the heroes are, who the visionaries are or were, the artists, the activists of yesterday and today who
Mm,
are just pushing innovation forward, who are infiltrating pop culture and who are changing the narrative unmasked
yeah.
so that we can too unmask.
And who are some of those people for you that you discovered throughout? I assume you had to go searching for those people because, like you say, they are people who are doing amazing things, but they aren't
Mhm.
getting the recognition or the attention. But I'd love to know who some of those people are. Not that, people shouldn't go and read your book the second that it is out. I have already pre-ordered it. I'm very excited.
Yes, guys, let's get
But
those pre-orders in.
don't worry, there will be a link in the description for where people can download your book and all of that information with release dates, all that jazz. But yeah, who were some of those people for you?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, there are different types of unsung, right? I think one of
Mm,
my biggest names, and your listeners may know this name, but one of the people that I really kind of dig into, not only in the book, but also in the PBS series, is Brad Lomax. So not enough people know that name, and they
mm,
really should. I recently had put up something on like a social post somewhere where I said something about Judy Human. And I was
sure.
like, if you don't know who Judy Human is, look her up. And
Yeah.
if you do know who Judy Human is, look up Brad Lomax. So Brad Lomax was also part of the sit-in that if it didn't happen, then we would not
Mm,
have essentially the ADA today, the Americans
yeah.
with Disabilities Act. And so they sat there for 26 days in a federal building to get the federal government to listen and try to change some things. But they
Mm,
were all folks with disabilities. So people need oxygen, people need shit, right?
yeah.
So there were like 10 other sit ins happening, and nine of them fell apart after a day or two. And this one lasted for 26 days. It was led by Judy and a couple of other women at the helm. But the only
Mm,
reason it lasted 26 days was because of Brad Lomax. He was able to get the Black Panthers to bring in food, which then brought a much bigger coalition together through the Black Panther Network. The Black
mm,
Panther Network also had newspapers and articles written about this thing that was happening that was generally not being covered. And, this guy was 25 years old. He was a kid and doing all of these things. And so history has not really underscored his name enough. So I speak about Brad Lomax in the book
mm,
and his contributions. But one of the things about the book, too, is that I do go into the histories, folks that we do know. I definitely give folks from the histories our flowers, but I think we need to talk about people of today. So
Yeah.
I do a lot of interviews with friends that are doing amazing things. So we have Nick Novicki, who's a comedian who's doing just amazing work, a TV writer. He's been to every single continent, maybe not like Antarctica, but he's been
You
to
know,
every
the
single,
optional one.
yeah, the optional one that's like, is that really one or is that just like
You know,
like
for
the ice cubes
penguins.
for the exactly. I speak with folks like Imani Barbarin, who's just an
Mm,
amazing content creator, Maysoon Zaid, who is an amazing comedian. I speak with RJ Mitty, a great actor. I speak to the Coldplay team. So they do a lot of accessibility at their
yeah.
concerts and they're great. I don't know. Have you been to any of their concerts?
I haven't, but they were on my list of people to ask you about because I know I read recently that Chris Martin has, oh God, the American pronunciation. I grew up in the States, but I've lived in the UK for a long time, so I'm going to say
Okay.
tinnitus, but I don't know
Oh,
how the
yes,
US.
tinnitus.
Yeah, there you go. So it was because of that, he has implemented a bunch of accessibility measures, but I would love to get your take and like what those are. And I haven't been, but I remember a few years ago, I don't know if this was before he got tinnitus, but there was a very vivid picture in my head of a wheelchair user who was essentially like crowd surfing in their wheelchair. And
Oh,
I
that's
thought,
fun.
I mean, major respect if you're brave enough to do that, but oh my God, it looked like a death trap. As a wheelchair user myself, I mean, obviously this guy's was a manual wheelchair, whereas mine's
Sure.
electric, so there's no chance in hell of that happening for
Yeah,
me.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, I'd love to talk about like what Coldplay are doing and why it matters.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, the reason it matters is because they have a global reach and it allows
Yeah.
for top-down, folks following suit. But then the negative side to that is because they have such a global reach, they are able to afford these kinds of things. And everywhere they go, they are able to kind of dictate what they want to see. Not all
Mm,
artists have that. Yeah, Team Lachi and Team Coldplay, very close. We love everything they're doing. They do everything from touch tours for the blind. So before the concert, they will have folks who are blind be able to touch the stage, perhaps some merch, things of that nature.
wow.
Um, for deaf folks, they have a whole deaf section. They have sign language. They even have what they call sub packs, which are packs that folks can wear that are connected to the beat somehow
Yeah.
so that deaf folks can feel the vibration. That was
Wow.
kind of the first thing Chris Martin started implementing after he got tinnitus. But then they, kept going. They have raised platforms for wheelchair users. They have
Mhm.
sensory areas for folks who need just a quieter space. We were just recently at a concert, and we had a person who had a dog actually that was reacting poorly. So they actually went to the sensory
Mm,
space for their dog. So many things that they're implementing. And of course, they keep their website accessible. They do what
mm,
they can to have the accessible information. So if you were to think, well, what can I do? What can I benefit from? They have that information just there on the website, which is one of the things that we at Ramped are trying to get all venues to do. It costs
yeah.
zero to update your website with at least an email for someone to ask questions about accessible features. But I want to see more of that because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, if folks with disabilities could get out, they would. But it's actually beneficial to folks who don't identify as disabled, right? Folks
Yeah.
who are just feeling a little under the weather that day, or maybe they don't want bright lights that day, or maybe they're having a sensory trigger just that day. Maybe they're temporarily disabled. Maybe they're going through seasonal depression. Maybe it's their son, their daughter, their dad. There's so many like reasons
Mm,
why this is universally beneficial. So definitely wanted to highlight what Coldplay's doing, but also talking to folks like Senator Duckworth. So we spoke with her as well,
mm,
and she talked about in the workplace how to advocate for yourself for the things you need, how it turns out that when you walk in there and everything's inaccessible and you advocate for the things you need, you're just one person. It turns out that everybody else needs it, right?
yeah.
And now everyone else is using the thing that you advocated for. And so it just kind of shows that not only is it a service to yourself to advocate? But it turns out being a service to the wider community.
Yeah, I mean, inclusive design, whether that's in like a policy or a physical space or a digital space or whatever it is, it benefits absolutely everyone in
Mhm.
different ways. And I think that that really can't be undersold. But I think, even if it was just for disabled people, I mean, I mean, in the UK alone, I don't know what the population is in the US, but I mean, there are 16 million disabled people in the UK. Like, that's roughly about 1 in 4, or sometimes people say 1 in 5 people. I mean, that's a huge amount of people. Like you say, everyone has access needs in different ways, but I mean, this is a huge segment of the population that can so easily be included or excluded. And like you say, with venues and their websites and finding out accessibility information, I mean, it's so difficult to find that. And then also with the stress of, like, you want to see someone big and you want to get tickets, and you don't have the information about where you're going to be able to sit, or you're going to be able to see, or you're going to be able to go to the bathroom. All of these questions that other people don't have to do.
Yeah, and I think sometimes seeing it on the website just feels more welcoming. Like you're going
Yeah.
to have a better time knowing that they cared to do that. But also, speaking of numbers, so in the US, we have a population altogether of around over 300 million. But in terms of folks with disabilities, I think we're at, or at least adults with disabilities, we're at 72 million, something ridiculous.
Hmm.
And for the CDC, which is where we would find the stats, they have reported that in terms of folks reporting to have some form of disability, we're at 29%. That's as of 2024.
Okay.
So we're nearing a third. So
Yeah.
we're at a fourth and we're nearing a third. And, when I do my talks, as I kind of travel around and do these sort of little TED Talk-esque, I call them keynote concerts where they book me to speak, but I show up with a piano. Um,
Nice.
I tell them, like, look to your left, look to your right, look in front of you, and look within. One of these folks identify as having a disability or have a disability but don't identify.
Yeah.
And it could be you, right? And so what that does is that opens up people to read, because it turns out not a lot of people know these stats. I'm surprised at how like much folks' jaws are consistently dropped. And they're
Mm.
like, what? 1 in 4? And I'm like, yeah, it's about to be 1 in 3, baby. You better hurry up and get on the train.
Yeah, it is wild how people think disability is this rare thing that, is an unfortunate incident that happens like for every 1 in 1,000, or, 1 in 1 million people. But when you look at the broad spectrum of disability and all the different types of disabilities, there are so many. And I think what you said was really interesting about, the amount of people who choose to identify as disabled versus the people who, like you mentioned a little bit ago, might have shame around that bit of their identity and therefore choose to tick no on that question, or just
Mhm.
don't answer that question because they may know it to be true, or they may, be denying that part of their identity. They might be masking, or they may not, they'll know that there's something different, but they don't know what it's called. Or are they just weird, or do they have,
Exactly.
a
Right.
condition that can explain things?
Yeah, because there's so many reasons why someone would tick no or just not know, right? It's
Yeah.
either the shame, they don't realize it, but also who's being asked. I know that you're not always asking black and brown folks, right?
Mm.
You're not always asking, the undocumented migrant workers, right? We don't
Yeah.
know. There's sample sizes to these things.
Yeah.
And so we don't really know who's actually getting these forms and filling these things out. There was a study, and I don't want to get too racial, but the straight cis 20 to 32 or something year old
Mm.
white male is
Yeah.
like what all of the medicine is done on, right?
Yes.
And so, like, and even just white women are not getting the proper care because they're not being studied on, right?
Yeah.
And so we're like in such a no man's land of like, how are we actually supposed to know if these stats are right? How are we supposed to know if these cures are working when at the end of the day, our sample sizes are so skewed? that we don't know. And then secondarily, the other thing I wanted to mention while you were talking is now this is not the most popular opinion that I have. So I've gotten into a few like discussions over this.
Go for it.
I think everyone is disabled. That it is
Interesting.
I think it's whether or not you either identify or recognize. Because at the end of the day, I feel that we have a big tent disability umbrella, which includes, right, physical disabilities like wheelchair users and cane users, crutch users, or folks with, mobile disabilities. It includes, the cognitive disabilities, the intellectual disabilities, the sensory conditions, right? But it
Yeah.
also includes mental health disabilities, which could be depression, anxiety, bipolar. It also includes chronic conditions that could be
Mm,
anything from freaking MS to asthma to so many other things. And then everything is a spectrum. I mean, tinnitus is on the spectrum of deafness. You could be
mm,
profoundly deaf or you could have temporary tinnitus. Blindness is such a huge spectrum. You could be totally blind, you could be partially blind, you could have different forms of blindness where you have peripheral vision but not central vision, or you have
mm.
night blindness, or you have day blindness. I know people who have 20/20 vision but are also blind, right? And you're like, well, how is
Okay.
that? Well, they have RP, which is that their blindness is slowly going inward like this. So they
Okay.
they have 20/20 central vision while their periphery is going in. So they can actually legally drive while being legally blind, right?
Wow.
So they're so large and vast of a spectrum that there is no way that everybody doesn't sit somewhere.
I think that that's so interesting. And I think you're absolutely right to include all of those different groups. And I think, there's all of those conditions or all of those diagnoses, but then there's also the choosing to identify. So there's
Yes.
almost like those two elements to it. But I really identify with what you were saying about all of those different conditions because I personally work at a charity where we advocate or we attempt to advocate on behalf of all impairment groups in the UK when it comes to transport. And whenever we talk about disability, we say that, this includes but is not limited to,
Sure.
like you said, mental health, neurodivergence, chronic
Hmm.
illness, all of those things. Because if you look at it from a social model of disability perspective, it's about do you face a barrier and therefore, are you prevented from accessing something, doing something, whatever it may be, because society or someone else has put that barrier in your way. And I think, what you said about like the representation, I think it's so incredibly important. I mean, we could talk for ages, I'm sure, about like medicine and why it's so incredibly harmful that those studies are being conducted the way they are. I don't know if you'll have seen recently there was a photo, but there was also an article that I read about how this current administration, which I think we probably both have very strong feelings about, there was a meeting about women's health policy on a national level, and there was not one woman in that room. And that is both heartbreaking and unsurprising at the same time. But I want to come back because I know you said that you don't want to necessarily get too much into race, but I think it's a really important topic, and I'm hoping if you're comfortable talking about sort of that intersection of your identities within the
Absolutely.
music industry and how that's felt for you.
So, yes, absolutely. First of all, do agree on all of your points. This whole idea of all men dictating women's health is so like we're going backwards.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, so being black, disabled, woman, queer aligned, like I have all the things. I tick all the
Mm,
boxes.
mm,
But a person first. I'm just a human navigating the humanity space.
mm.
It's been interesting. I like to tell people that it's easier for me to be blind than it is to be black,
That's so interesting.
especially in America.
Yeah.
So, and again, I'm pretty confident and, bombastic. I have no trouble walking into the airport and there's this really long line, I have no trouble just taking my cane and just bumbling to the front and saying, it's my turn next.
Yeah.
So being blind, but then being black, it's like, you know, yet I am systemically denied things I didn't even realize I'm being denied. Right.
Mm,
So being black and disabled, as well as a woman, is a trifecta that you don't often see. I mean, first and foremost, you don't often see black women. So here's a great
yeah.
example. Just recently, there was an episode of The Daily Show where Josh Johnson, I don't know if you know him, but he's a black comedian.
I don't know.
He's talking about something, and he's like a correspondent, and he's saying like,
Hmm.
today I'm reporting on, something from the White House. And then a white woman stands in front of him and she says, I'm actually going to be doing this now. And he was like, wait a second, you just took my job. And she's like, yeah, well, we're not doing DEI anymore. So,
Oh my
and then
God.
she starts talking, and then a white man stands in front of her and goes, actually, I'll be taking over. It was like a comedy bit.
Yeah.
But I was like, well, where's the black woman?
Yeah. Standing presumably behind the black man.
Exactly, but not even given the voice to be a part of the discussion.
Yeah.
And so it's one of the reasons why I have to sort of really make sure, A, that my voice is heard, that I get my recognition,
Mm,
but also that I bring my family with me, right? Because
yeah.
I've learned that if I do this on my own as a Black disabled woman, folks will find any sort of time, way, or place to put me back into the shadows, right?
Yeah.
So, community and building a family and a culture, whether it's through Ramped, whether it's through the Grammys, whether it's through all of my music networks or my disability networks, every time I get something, bringing them all with me
Mm,
allows for these gatekeepers to say, oh, so it's you in that army, right? So it keeps them from being able to silence my voice and to start recognizing this visionary trajectory. The other thing I'll say too, as a Black woman, is so I've recently been putting out these really sort of high energy songs, talking about my
mm.
experience, just rapping over electronic dance,
Yeah.
having a great time dancing and showing off my glam canes and just having a really great time because, you know, and I mean, this is going to be a little stereotypical, but I mean, we carry with us a little bit of pop, oomph, right? We
Yeah.
have this cultural, oh, okay, they did it, so it's cool kind of vibe to it. And
Mm,
so I want to hurry up and get past all of the hard and sad and boring discussions about disability and
mm,
hurry up and start talking about pop culture, talking about fashion, talking about swag, talking about
mm.
music and movement. And it's gonna, I mean, not to be whatever, but it's gonna come from a Black voice if we want to talk about it in that sense. And I'm like, well,
Mm.
why not my Black voice? Just because I'm a woman doesn't mean I shouldn't be at the helm. And I
Yeah.
have been blessed to have supporters that see that in me as well.
I mean, again, there's so much in there. I think the first thing that's coming to mind though is there a pressure that comes with that?
There is, but the pressure comes in being visionary, right?
Mm,
Oftentimes, coming up with ideas and leading sort of the movement of ramped, there are pressures there because I would have to try to find other visionary movement leaders that I can sort of speak to and almost share my wins and woes with, especially women leaders or leaders with disabilities. Frankly,
mm,
women leaders with disabilities. And so, I'm making that sort of friend network as well. But one of the things that I love to do is just be myself. Like,
mm.
I'm not putting on the way I'm talking to you right now is literally the same way I spoke to Joe Biden. Like, there's
Oh my
no like
God.
there's no putting on airs because who am I doing that for? You know how many people are going to be in my grave with me? One,
That's
me. I'm
fair.
gonna be the only one there. It wasn't a trick question.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess.
So I feel like, for instance, some of the songs I'm putting out, right? I'm talking about, you know, let me get your guy, let me get your girl, come to my
Yeah.
place. I'm talking about sex, I'm talking about queer stuff, I'm talking about, pretty raunchy things in my lyrics. And then I'm putting them out into the public and I'm dancing to them on Instagram. Meanwhile, I'm turning around and talking to world leaders. So I
Yeah.
do that so that I don't have the pressure. Because the last thing I want is for somebody to be like, well, you're getting canceled because you said the word dick. I'm like, boo, have you listened to my whole catalog? Like, all I say is
Yeah.
dick. So that takes the pressure off. Just being myself in all of my different mediums takes a lot
Yeah.
of the pressure off because you know what you're going to get.
And I get that. I really do. But to me, I also feel, like you said, you are confident. And I think that that's an incredibly beautiful thing. But I also know that's an incredibly brave thing because, we can talk about cancel culture and there's all of that, but I think there's just also such a vulnerability in being your full self. If you're having a conversation with, say, in your case, a world leader, in my case, maybe, like some other CEO or, a transport executive, whoever it might be, but it's easy to almost put on a different persona as a way of like protecting yourself, or well, that was me in work mode, this is me, like in your case, this is me as an artist, this is me as an advocate. But there's such a vulnerability in being all of those things at the same time.
Well, yes, but it depends on how you frame it. So there was something this guy I follow, well, they that I follow named Alok, and they said something very interesting that was like everyone's in the closet, not just gay people, right? Not just folks in the queer space. Everyone's in some sort of closet.
Mm,
They have some sort of thing that they're afraid of, or they're trying to hide, or that they're trying to navigate around so that they don't get found out. Maybe that weakness doesn't get found out, or that trauma doesn't get found out. And the cure, or the, opposite to that, I say, is liberation. Literally
mm,
liberation from the closet, right? When you accept sort of like the deepest part of yourself that society either says is limiting or says is wrong or bad or you should hide, when you
mm,
kind of embrace that part of yourself and recognize the asset that it is, there's a huge liberation that comes with that. And
yeah,
that's pretty much where I came to eventually. I was, like I said to you earlier, I was ashamed of my blindness. Or, well,
yeah,
my blindness brought me shame. And my neurodivergencies, which at that time we didn't have that word. I didn't know exactly what was off, but
mm,
that brought me shame. Not having a lot of friends brought me shame. Having my parents being African and them not buying me the right clothes that all the other girls were wearing brought me shame. All these things have brought me shame. I wanted to have the straight hair. I wanted to have all these things, right? So then eventually I started unraveling that shame and finding that liberation, which was like, I love my kinky braidy hair. I love that I navigate differently and that I'm winning the game of life on hard. I mean, my latest song is called
yeah,
Life on Hard, speaking specifically about this. Or I love my African heritage. Like I am obsessed with being Nigerian. Like it's one of the best things I believe about me, and we can get into that in
mm,
another interview. But it's that
mm,
liberation that makes it so that I don't have to change my personas because I'm not hiding. When you have these personas on, it's because you're trying to hide a different thing from a different person.
yeah,
And if you no longer are hiding that thing and you're liberated, then you are just doing the one thing. It's super ingrained in my identity to the point where I like to tell people that the actual thing, because people are like, well, Lachi, you wear like 50 hats. How do you do all this stuff? And
yeah,
I like to tell them I'm only doing one thing. The one thing I'm doing is I'm using pop culture or music or, fashion or whatever to combat the stigma and erasure of the disability identity. Because that's
yeah,
what I really want to do. I want to combat the stigma and erasure of the disability identity and disability with a big D. Because I feel like that's what everyone is super afraid of. They're
yeah.
afraid of being pathologized. And so I'm trying to
Interesting.
kill that stigma of pathology so that people can find pride in the part of themselves society has told them is the most limiting.
I mean, my God, should people pay you to speak? Because I'm just like sitting here and I'm like having these like kind of like mini epiphanies, and like I'm just like, fuck, like wow, that makes so much sense. And there's so much beauty in that like I will admit I don't listen to my podcast back ever. And I just know that this is one that I am gonna do because I think that there's so much of what you said that I just feel like needs to be like a viral sound on TikTok
Yeah,
of,
right.
just this incredible, like, powerful pride and identity, which is something that's so, speaking personally, is really hard, or it feels like, because you say, as society is telling you, all these different parts of you are bad or wrong. And, in my case, yeah, I am a white person, so that's not something that I identify with, but, being a woman, being disabled, and, at parts of my career, not now, I'm in my 30s, but like when I was young, and, being like judged for that as well. And it's very difficult in my head to accept all of those parts of yourself because of all of this messaging that it
Mhm.
is wrong, it is bad. And oh, yeah, it's so powerful what you said. But I'm thinking within the music industry, sort of what are things that you want to see within the music industry? And like what I'm also curious, like what has been maybe a surprising like moment that you've had? Like, yeah, I'm so curious where you want the industry to go because I feel it's so competitive and it's so,
Yeah.
there are equally a lot of artists, but there aren't a lot of artists that are different and that, have different segments of their identity and have that all on beautiful display. So, yeah, I'd love to know what you think about where the industry is going based on your experience.
I think the industry is very slowly looking at being more inclusive, very slowly. But I am on the National Board of Trustees at the Recording Academy, which is one of the most prestigious global sort of leaders in music. So
Mm,
where they're going is generally where a lot of folks are tending to go as well. And despite the current administration, they are still, it has a Black CEO, the Recording Academy, and also a Black female chair. So they are
wow.
really trying to make sure that the board downward are very diverse, making all the rules, strategies, and policy that we start to see in the music industry. And then I'm one of those people that's a trustee. I mean, the very fact that a disabled blind woman, right, neurodivergent, first
Yeah,
openly disabled woman, first blind woman to be sitting in that seat shows progress.
yeah,
But also the work we're doing in Ramped in and of itself is progress. I mean, apart from being able to partner with some of the largest music giants in the world, everybody from Live Nation to the Grammys to CMAs to do some consulting and things of that nature, we have been able to put out trainings on disability culture, inclusion, and identity. And we definitely encourage you, if you happen to be connected to any music agency or venue, to tell them to take our training because they are
mm,
super game changing. But also, the fact that we're building this coalition, this network, this global network of professionals with disabilities, neurodivergences, and other conditions who are working professionals in the industry is also a really huge step. And it's not just that we have like, okay, songwriters or bass players. No, we have recording executives. We have high level booking agent directors, right? That are coming in, and some of them are remaining incognito and they're just benefiting from our resources, which is allowed. But some are finding their voice and their journey of coming out and disclosing through Ramped. And so that's one of the big things that we're doing specifically for disability and accessibility within the music industry, trying to make those changes, trying to throw parties and events that are highly inclusive and
mm,
accommodating, where folks with and without disability identity are coming together and shaking hands and making deals and getting signed to things. And not just the folks on the stage, but the folks behind the stage, the folks who pick the acts, the folks who sign the checks, the folks who produce the records, so that it's not just representation, it's also systemic. So it's people
yeah.
within the institution actually trying to help change the policies and change the written rules so that things are more accessible and inclusive for people with disabilities in the music industry.
And I think that that's incredible to hear about. And like, I would highly recommend that people look up the organization because there are some really amazing things that you guys are doing. Yeah, I think there's this perception, at least from, outside the music industry, that it's all very like competitive, it's very cutthroat, it's very calculated, it's very, I mean, because I'm thinking about some of the big artists right now, there isn't that level of like visible diversity, I suppose, in some of the big artists right now that I'm immediately thinking of. But would you say that like that's a misrepresentation like of the industry,
Well,
that
I
it
would
maybe
say
isn't how we think
I
it is?
I think there's two issues to it. I think there's a lot of masking, and I think there's a lot of like people don't know certain things. Like I just recently found out that Lil Jon was blind. So he's
Oh
legally
wow.
blind. He's blind in one eye, right? And so I feel like there's a lot of information we just don't know because no one's trying to celebrate it.
Yeah.
It's why I keep kind of coming back to Ramped because we're about celebrating it, right? Right now, the industry is all about, don't tell anyone, just make it, just do what you can to make it. And what that does is that gets you out of the barrel, but it keeps the rest of the crabs in, right?
Mm,
And so we're all about trying to get more of these crabs out of this barrel because the reason why everything is feels so cutthroat is because of the high level of exploitation. You know what's so screwed up about the music industry? It is an industry of exploitation where the artists want to be exploited. It's like, hey, exploit me, exploit me.
mm,
What? So that's very backwards. And really, what it should be is people should become business owners and create a product that they exploit, right? They don't want to, like, hi, person, I want you to exploit me, right? Of course, that's going to screw up your authenticity, what you
mm.
feel about yourself, how you do things, and it runs rampant. And then everybody becomes super and hyper competitive and just trying to get themselves out. But, a lot of the gatekeepers are kind of becoming a thing of the past with social
Mm.
media. So let's say, for instance, gatekeepers would try to find the next big artist, but meanwhile, TikTok is just finding the next big artist.
Yeah.
So it is putting a lot of the hands into the audience and the algorithm, I guess. But it is allowing for folks to crowdsource their next big favorite artist. And that is
Mm.
changing the game for the music industry. However, a lot of folks with disabilities do have trouble getting onto those algorithms.
Yeah, I mean, or as a music lover, there's so many people that I find on TikTok that, they'll be singing a song, they might have a segment of a video, but then that song isn't on any of the streaming platforms. And it's, how can you, share this song? Can you save this video or whatever it is to convince record labels, that that song should be put out because, it's, well, all of these people in the comments are saying, I'm going to download this immediately because you've just heard that snippet and then you desperately want the full song. I mean,
Right.
that happens to me daily, almost like on TikTok. But I was wondering if you could explain what you mean a little bit more about artists being, hey, exploit me. Like, what does that mean to you, and like, what does that look like?
Well, to get deep into it, that may be a conversation for another podcast. But to kind of make it short, it essentially is I tend to think that an artist should be their own boss, right? So you say, this is the art I want to make. I want to make money on this art. So I want to hire maybe a financial person to help me do this. I want to hire a marketing person. I want to hire this, right? You may not have the money for that. So maybe it's a friend, right? Or whatever. Or maybe you do it yourself because you're good at different hats. That's the way it should be. But the way it is an artist says, I want to be signed to a manager that tells me everything to do. And I want them
Oh,
to tell me what to wear. I want them to tell me how to do this and tell me this and that. And what ends up happening is that these managers or these labels, they tend to go for younger folks because they're easier to manipulate. And then they
mm,
shape them, they tell them what to do, they groom them in a sense. Then they could become a mega star because they were groomed and shaped and kind of sent through the funnel. And then people see that and they go, I want that to be me. not recognizing how much that person that went through that gave up,
Yeah.
and how much their life is probably not in the best place it could be now that they're on the other end. So
Yeah.
that's what I mean by like, hey, exploit me is generally when people want to kind of do major, like be part of
Sure.
a label situation. And listen, it happened to me. Like when I told you I was first kind of signed
Mm.
to a major imprint, it wasn't that bad of a situation, but it was still very much I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm young and dumb, and they're just
Mm.
telling me everything to do. And I got the bad feeling in my gut pretty early. But some folks don't get that bad feeling in their gut until it's too late.
Yeah, and I think, there's confidence in that, and then there's trusting the gut, but also, the more that you're talking about it, the more I'm like, well, if your dream is to be the next big performer and maybe, they don't have that artistry side to them potentially, then I can see why, it's what do I need to do to make this dream come true? And,
Yeah.
they will do that. You're absolutely right about, things that they are giving up. And I mean, I wouldn't be me if I went through this episode without some mention of Taylor Swift. But like, I think, and I'm sure you're like absolutely sick of like hearing it and everything, but I think, her situation of what she gave up initially were the
Right.
rights to, those original recordings and to see, a bit more of an insight into the music industry and about ownership. And now I've seen, other artists who are, I didn't know that that was a thing. And
Yeah.
they're able to now have a more educated
Yes.
stance or choice on what do I want and what am I happy to sacrifice, if anything.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think that's true. I think that a lot of things in the industry are hidden because a
Mm,
lot of folks don't want to be blackballed by, giving out the secret sauce or being the first case or worst case kind of thing. So a lot of the times these battles or these whatevers are hidden. I mean, I hit a lot of my battles on the come up, right? And
mm,
so I think today, a lot of people are being a lot more open because a lot of people have a lot of fan support now, right?
mm,
And then folks like the Taylor Swifts and tons of other folks openly talking about their situations have allowed more people to openly talk about their situations. And I mean, it kind of brings it back full circle. It's why, we need to have more folks openly talking about their mental health and their
yeah,
neurodivergence and stop masking because just like people are recognizing they can buy their masters back because other artists did, they can start to recognize that they can, take back their mental health, take back their
mm.
neurodivergence, and claim their identity just like others are.
So to wrap up, I would love for you to tell people where can they find you, and then what are the things that you want people to be aware of that are coming up for you. There's the book, but like what else? Oh my God. Okay, so on screen we have you holding the beautiful book I Identify as Blind with a blue background, white text, and then some different color shapes on there. And legitimately, I have pre-ordered this and I'm so excited. Yeah, where can people
So
find you? What are you up to next?
absolutely. So people can find me at lachimusic.com or on all socials at Lachi Music, LACHIMUSIC. I'm constantly putting out new records. We're putting out I'm That end of September. I'm That should be out. Like she said, the book. So that is I Identify as Blind. Pre-order it now. The more pre-orders we get, the more likely we'll be able to get Braille on the cover, which is going to be super amazing. That comes out January 2026. I am running Ramped. So if you yourself are a musician or a professional in the music industry that identifies with disability or neurodivergence or any other condition, find us at ramped.org. If you happen to be a venue or an event space and you want to get trained, see us at ramped, rampd.org. And then lastly, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we do glam canes. Everybody know what glam canes is. I glam my own cane, and we glam other canes. Let me see if I can get this glam cane to you guys. Bejeweled glam canes, check them out. All types of glam canes. We're going to be doing quads and walkers soon. as well as we're testing out wheelchairs. So we're doing Emily Liddell's wheelchair for her wedding. Yes, we are.
Oh my
But
gosh, yes.
so check us out at glamcanes.com, ramped.org, and Lachi Music. Thank you so much.
Oh, Lachi, thank you so, so much for coming on the Wheelchair Activist. It has been a really powerful hour with you, and just thank you so, so much. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Wheelchair Activist. If you want to stay up to date and catch all of our previous episodes, you can find them all on my website, thewheelchairactivist.com. You can also follow me on social media at emma.vogelman on most platforms, and if you'd like to support the podcast, our links to the GoFundMe and Buy Me a Coffee are in this episode description. And I'm so excited to bring you another episode next month. See you then.